Good evening, Nick family. Welcome to another edition of the Queen's Court. We're here today to talk about the Knicks. 3-1 last week, 33-42 on the season, 11th in the Eastern Conference, basically out of the playoff hunt. If you haven't already, please like, subscribe, hit that notification button so you'll be notified anytime anything goes live on this channel. That includes this show, Knicks and Bruises with Tony Crow, The Controversy with Josh, aka Uncle Fulio, the MBK Report with Ron and John for still Knicks fans, and of course, pregame, postgame, morning, the shoot around with the creator of the channel, Simeon Russell. Let's get right into it. I'm joined by those same guys, Tony Crow, Josh, and Ron, and Sim. How are you? How's everyone doing?
Hey, you got the good. MBK starting five. We might have to make a special show called MBK starting five because then Isaiah, you off the bench, Isaiah, and we got
cornerstone at point guard.
We got international Andy as our overseas guy. We just waiting for him to make it to the league, but.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I didn't mean for this to happen, but it did. So let's get right into it. The Knicks played 4 games last week. We were 3-1. You guys see the stats here. We lost to Atlanta. We beat Charlotte. We beat Miami. We beat Detroit. Barrett played well for us. I should say Randle missed 3 of those 4 games. So let's get right into it. I'm not going to do my little game-by-game spiel for time's sake. I'm going to return to the panel, and I'm going to ask, what is it about last week that stood out for you guys before we get into before I ask specific questions about last week? Josh, we'll start with you.
Well, for me, I went to the Charlotte game, so that was fun. That's what stood out for me. And that was a really good game to watch. You've seen RJ Barrett really taking over this team and taking control, continue to remain aggressive, and basically taking that next step in his career. I know I've been hard on him his first 3 years in the NBA, hoping that he would eventually turn into this kind of player, and he has. All right. So, I think that's what stood out for me over this past week. Just him taking control of the team without Randle on the floor, and even with Randle on the floor coming back in the last game, RJ Barrett still, the Knicks going to him down the stretch of the ball game, and basically changing of the guard seems to be happening with the team. So I'm excited about that. And let's not forget about the kids. Kids are playing really well, and they are developing.
Okay. All right. Sim, then Ron, then Tony.
Yeah. For me, RJ is one, just like Josh just mentioned, but I don't want to forget about Obi. I thought Obi, in the absence of Julius Randle, came in and played some really good minutes, played hard and took it, I think he took the challenge to prove to everybody that he can be, one day be a starter in the league, you know what I mean? And, if he can perform that way, it definitely gives the front office something to think about, you know what I mean? And how they move forward with this team. If with Julius Randle, if they feel like he's not able to get his attitude together, then they may decide, they don't want that in the locker room and move on from him. And then Obi would have to step up. In that case, they'd have to find another shot maker. You know what I'm saying? But I think that probably his performance probably built some confidence in him. So, that kind of stood out to me.
Okay. Ron?
I pretty much agree totally with what Sim said. I think that RJ playing well, a little inefficiency, but playing well for the most part, stepping up without Julius there is big. But I really think the play of Deuce and Obi is huge, and even Jericho, just getting those extended minutes and being able to be out there and do their thing, I think is really huge. And I think it could be game changing for the Knicks. The better Obi plays, they have something that they can take a look at and say, well, maybe we can do something, around Obi and look to make other moves, kind of like what Sim's talking about.
Okay. Tony?
So, everything you guys said, and just to add 2 different areas, Taj Gibson really being a role model for these young guys, and in the sense of, staying ready. He don't know what kind of minutes he's gonna get from a day in, a day out, night to night, but he's always ready and had a real nice, productive stretch with the young guys, alongside the young guys, and led those guys, if not by the stats, but just his presence on the floor, as a stabilizer. So shout out to Taj and then Tibbs, coming out and defending his team to the media and letting them know, y'all might not even know what y'all talking about. You guys don't study the game like I do. You guys don't, watch the game and not hear day in and day out and witnessing what's going on in practice, et cetera, et cetera. Not only was that, I think, good for him, but I think it was good for the team to know that he got their back. You know what I mean? We in this together. It's not about one individual player. We win as a team. We lose as a team. So I like that. I think that's great for camaraderie and moving forward.
Yeah, I thought I wouldn't have to speak, and I can move right on to the question the next question, because I thought y'all would cover it all, but nobody mentioned IQ. I mean, I thought IQ played, pretty well this week from a playmaking perspective, on the ball, off the ball, how he handles the pick and roll, directing people to their spots, just really showing that he can play that position, but not in a traditional way. Let's put it that way. And I'm not sure as a starter just yet, but he's definitely trending in that direction. He was huge for us. I forget what game it was. What did we play before Detroit when he had 20 of his 23 points in the
Miami,
in that
Charlotte,
Miami.
Oh, Miami.
Yeah, it was it was 2 games. Yeah, the Miami game. He played very well. He played very well there. But getting to the main topic, from what we saw this week, how the team played in the absence of Randle. More ball movement, played with more renewed energy. Does that confirm that this team could be better without Randle?
I'll jump in. I don't think that they could be better without Randle. I don't think so. I see Ron wiping a tear from his eye when I just said that, but I don't think that they could be better without Randle. You know what I mean? Maybe you might like the brand of basketball better, the way that they share the ball, but if you're talking about win totals, I don't think so. I don't think so.
And thank you for keeping it very succinct for the sake of time. Go ahead, Josh.
Right.
I agree with Sam. Obviously, the brand of basketball looks a little bit better, looks a little bit cleaner. But I think Julius Randle is still a key focal point of this offense. I think our point production and our totals from a production standpoint, efficiency is not better when Randle's not on the floor. And those games that we didn't have Randle, we still, struggle to score offensively, right? And I think we become a little bit more one-dimensional without Randle out there on the floor. It's just we lose a wrinkle to the offense. So I don't think this team is better at this point without Julius Randle. Maybe in the next year or in a couple years, yes, but right now I don't think so.
And should I say as currently constructed?
That's correct.
Beautiful, Sam.
I
was gonna defend Ron and not let him die on the hill by himself.
He didn't even say anything. How can you die on the hill?
But we know where Ron stands. So what I'm gonna say is, depending on the return, you know what I mean. If we're talking addition by subtraction, absolutely not. But it really would depend on what the exchange is in losing a guy like Randle.
That's a good point. Ron?
Yeah. Thank you, Tony. Yes, I would say the same thing. If you just take Julius Randle away from this team, will the Knicks play a better brand of basketball for my liking? Yeah. But does that translate into more victories, especially against these really good teams? No, I don't think it does. You still need to make some moves. Like, you got to bring somebody else in they could be in a different position or something else, but they got to bring something to the team to make up for what Randle does give you.
Yeah, I actually agree. It depends on what you get back. But just taking him away from this team, like just say, for example, God forbid, he was injured and he couldn't play next season, and the Knicks obviously didn't get anything back. It's not a trade. He's just out. I don't see the Knicks being better. I do see, maybe IQ steps up, maybe Obi steps up, but there's levels to this. I mean, they would have to take like a big leap to actually take the place of Randle and kind of continue the trajectory that this team is on, or at least what the front office hopes that it's on. He could play. I mean, that's the bottom line. He's inefficient. He can play. And you know what I think is clouding the discussion now? We're not talking just about his game. All of this emotionality and his antics and, whether or not he can play in New York, whether he's a good fit, it just clouds everything, right? If we were just talking about his game, well, let me ask the panel. If we were just talking about his game and not all of this other stuff, would you still want to trade him this summer? Ron?
I would be willing to hear offers, but no, I wouldn't. I would be okay with him being on this team and us rocking with Randle. It's the other stuff, the mental stuff is what's really bothering me. And I just wanted to say one thing. This is quick, and some people may not like it, but I feel like when Randle's out of the game, that's when the development starts.
Wow, that's a strong statement. We'll get back to that, because basically what you're saying is that development is not happening in practice, is not happening in the off season, is not happening when they're in the gym practicing. It's only happening when Randle is off the floor. That's a pretty strong statement. Doesn't give a lot of kudos to the players either. Now,
I'm not saying they don't practice, they don't work on things. I'm just saying true development for some of these guys happens on the court in real game time action. And
how about additional? Is it fair to say additional development? Is it fair to say additional development?
Additional development, but in the case of Obi, I feel like that's where his development happens.
Then he has a problem.
But
well, anyway, let's okay. Go ahead, Sim.
I was gonna say, but I think that's part of development. You got to beat out the guy that's in front of you. Yes, if you can't beat out the guy that's in front of you, then you're not good enough. Like, for example, when the Los Angeles Lakers saw that Kobe Bryant was better than Eddie Jones, they got him out of town. You know what I'm saying? And I think the same thing would happen if they said Obi's better or is going to be better than Julius Randle. We got to get him out of town. So if you're not better than the guy in front of you and you can't be better than the guy in front of you, then, maybe part of you developing is to first say, prove to the team that I'm better than him and the team is better when I'm on the floor. I think that's the first part of development, for Obi. And although I like the way he's been playing, I still don't think he's, at least not right now, better than Randle.
He's never going to be better than Randle, but
then how can? All right. So and
he's not better. He's different. He's different. He's not going to be better. Randle's a good player, but he's different.
But that was a different statement.
But the argument he could put. I'm not saying this, but the team could be better with Randle. I mean, with Obi. So you could, like, if that's your argument, I'm not agreeing with it, but I can see that being an argument.
Right. Yeah, that's my argument. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I just don't agree at all. I don't agree at all. When people say Randle's on the floor and it stunts the development of other players, what about RJ Barrett? Did RJ Barrett struggle to develop with Randle on the floor last season? What about in the beginning of this season as RJ started to come along with Randle on the floor? Right? People want to talk about Obi, but what about the rest of the guys? What about Emmanuel Quickley? What about Mitchell Robinson? Right? So I just don't agree with that notion. I think, fans are so fed up with Randle because of all the extra stuff that you're talking about, Steph. But on the floor, I think Randle helps people. He makes people better on the floor. I'm sorry. Again, the team may not do as well as we all had hoped, but I'm looking at the development of some of these other young players with Randle on the floor, and I have to say they have developed. So I struggle with the notion for anyone to say that Julius Randle does not help the people around him develop. It may not happen the way you like it, but I still think that development, and there's something taking place there with these kids with Randle on the floor.
Yeah, and to Sim's point, if the runway has to be cleared for you to be able to start, that's part of the problem. I think it's on Obi to put that pressure on Randle put that pressure on the coaching staff, put that pressure on the front office to say, you know what? In his limited minutes and in practice, this guy looks really good. And I think we need to create minutes for him. I don't see him playing at the 5. He's playing behind Randle. The only way for us to get him more minutes is to trade Randle for another piece. But I think this guy's ready. And so that was actually one of the questions, and I guess we added and we asked it and answered it. Did we see enough of Obi during this week? And you can include the rest of the season to feel comfortable about trading Randle. And what I'm hearing from the panel, other than Ron, is not quite. Is that fair?
Yes, it's for me. It's not. Yeah, it's not quite, because it can work if you gotta bring in another scorer, because Obi's not going to create for you. Someone's going to create for Obi. So if you're saying, hey, we're cool with him giving us 15 and 7, 15 and 8 from that power forward spot and doing the things that he does, but you got to know that someone else is going to have to create, or else you're putting a heck of a lot of pressure on RJ. And that could, turn into something that you don't like, I think.
And turn into the fans turning on him, like you've always said. Or when RJ's the guy and there's nobody else to take that heat, he's gonna take all that heat.
Yep, it's all gonna rest on his shoulders. You know what I mean? And he's gonna have to be the one to answer to everything. If Randle, I look at his numbers this year and they're down. And I was having a conversation with someone the other day on Ron's show about where he gets his shots and his efficiency and things like that. I still just look at the overall efficiency. He's never shot this poorly before in his career overall, right? 41% from the field. I don't think I think next year he's going to be better. And I have seen things, seen things throughout the season where, he's trying to learn how to distribute better, facilitate better, move faster, make quicker decisions. You heard him speak about it in press conferences. I got to make quicker decisions. I have to not second guess myself, right? So these are things that he's aware of, and it seems like he's working on. Obviously, you still have the times where, he holds the ball too long, his decisions are slow, or, you just wonder like what was happening and he turns the ball over, right? There are those things. I can deal with all of that. The antics, nobody wants to deal with.
Right, correct.
You know what I mean? But if it was just based on play, I wouldn't. I would be like, you know what? It's cool. We bring him back. We get a guard that can be the decision maker, and then see where he goes from there. So that's why I think the front office has to sit down with him and figure out, is this what we got to deal with? Because if so, then we may have to move on. If not, and we can get past this. This is just this season. We can get past it. Then let's figure out what we can do.
Okay. So basically what I'm hearing is if it wasn't for the antics, we wouldn't really be so ready to move on from him in the summer. That even though he's inefficient, even though his decision making is not that great, we would still want him on the team to kind of work it through.
Yeah.
Is part of that because he's a 20-10-5 guy and that's hard to find?
Exactly. I think he's undervalued by a lot of us Knicks fans.
Yeah, and for me, part of it is the fact that he's just getting into this role last year, really. A year and a half, let's say. Well, now it's been a little bit longer than that, but he's learning how to play in this role, and I still think there's learning to do. You know what I mean? And I think we should give him a chance to see, how he learns, how he develops in that role. He may not be developing skill-wise, but the game getting slower to him playing in that role, mentally, emotionally, he's still developing as a player.
But is he too old for this development? Like, it's not like I agree with you, and I'm not saying that. Well, anyway, I agree with you that this is maybe last year was the first time he was in this role. This year, this is his second year. But given his age, do you think that he's too old to be developing into this role?
I don't think so, because I think that he has the physical tools, and I don't know if he's going to jump higher in his career or get faster, right? But the game slowing down, learning the ins and outs of the game. I think the only thing that, like, your top players, the reason why they leave the league is not because they forgot the game. They're still learning about the game and they're getting better, but their body can't do it anymore. You know what I'm saying? So now you're just like, okay, I got to leave because I can think about everything that's going on, but I can't physically do what I want to do. I think he's 27 years old. I think he's got another 4 years to be in that prime physical peak. You know what I'm saying? Where he can still, learn the basketball game and figure out how to make things work out there on the court.
All right, Tony.
I'd argue 6 years.
Okay.
33 is I think that's when you kind of ending your prime traditionally. Another reason I agree with Sim is, prior to coming to New York, it's a guy who's gotten better year after year. Statistically, throughout his career, he's always gotten better. Then you look at year one and the improvement from that year to year two with the Knicks, and obviously night and day, right? So I expect him to come off of this down year and bring it right back up. Where he levels out at, where he reaches, I'm not sure, but it's gonna be better than this. And honestly, if it was just the field goal percentage, I think that would have made a tremendous difference in not only his numbers being a lot closer to last year, because I don't really think they're that far off, besides the percentages. So right. I think the percentage, the shot percentage, if that just increases another 5% or more, I think that changes everything. So
maybe not, because I think a part of how well he played last year was his consistency, and how. Listen, he still needed work even from last year, right? Even if his percentages was the same, his decision making still needed to improve, and it hasn't improved. It improved some, but not a lot. And that's my question. Even if he has 6 more years in his prime, if he's inching along in terms of growing into this role, he may take the rest of the 6 years to get there. You understand what I'm saying? Right. Whereas a younger player who's learning this role, by the time they're 26, they might be more experienced in the role, right? Because they've been in it for 5. They've been in it for 5 years. So that's my question with him. He's learning it, but how long is it going to take? How much of his prime is it going to take for him to get there? I guess that's the question.
But I'm not thinking of him as being the number one guy.
Oh, okay. Exactly. And now it's a different thing. Okay.
So like, and then, if you get a number one guy, now he may have to make some of these decisions every once in a while. And you have a guy that if the number one guy goes down, he can make some decisions. And I mean, not make some decisions, but he can step up and be in that role for a little while, and do it. You know what I'm saying? But I mean, I know that his game is still, like, mentally, his game is still going to grow. So even if he's your second or third guy, you feel confident that when you get to that point, he's going to make good decisions. So I don't think he's going to be a number one guy.
Okay. All right. So okay. I'm Josh.
Yeah, Queen, and I agree with that. I think the question, if you're asking about Julius Randle being the number one guy, I totally agree with Sam, and I agree that it might be a little bit too late in that aspect as far as his game and the growth of his game and stuff like that. But if you're talking about a player who can get better as far as his efficiency is concerned, as a number 2 or number 3, absolutely, no question about that. You look at players like DeMar DeRozan, who had like a little late bloom in his growth, right? Mm-hmm. And he's now 30-something years old, and now he's at the top of his game. Right, and he is a number 2 guy on, the Chicago Bulls. Some might argue even a number 1, right? But I think for Randle, I don't ever see Randle as being that number 1 guy. I don't see Randle being on like a winning team or successful team, championship level contending team. And as a leader, I don't see Randle being that as well. And I think that's the problem with a lot of Knicks fans that want to see him gone. They kind of already envision him as being the leader based off of last season, but I don't think he's paid like a number 1 guy or a leader, and I don't think that his game translates into that. I think if we just look at him as for what he's paid for, number 2 or number 3, once we bring that number 1 guy in here, I think that'll be easier for Julius Randle and worth keeping him and watching him develop as well.
All right, next question. I'm gonna start this with Ron. Is it on the organization at this point to see Randle for what he is, and if they can, bring in somebody that reduces his role? Because he's not a great decision maker, but we have him in the decision making capacity. And that's why we're seeing these turnovers, and we see him not functioning well, because we have him in a role that it seems like he's not fit for. But and maybe they didn't know that going into this season. So Ron, is it on the front office to now finally realize that and bring in somebody that kind of takes Randle out of this playmaking, decision-making role, lessen his decision-making, I should say?
I think you have to. It's 100%. You have to. Either you decide that he's not the type of player that you really want to have here. Maybe the antics are too much for you. Then you move on from him and try to build better around the team. Or you say, listen, he's a winning player. Maybe in a less stressful situation, if we build better and put more pieces around him, his stress level goes down. He's not put in positions to fail as much. And so therefore you get a better product from him and a better mindset. So you kind of could nip two things in the bud if you just build a little better around him. So, yeah, I think the front office has to do it because Tibbs can't do it. Tibbs is a loyal guy. Randle is a Tibbs guy now. So he's never going to judge Randle unfairly, I don't think. Or I mean, not unfairly, but I don't think he's going to look at Randle in a real objective manner. I don't know I think Tibbs, when Tibbs has you as his guy, I think he obviously he'll tell you if you're not doing something right, but I think you're his guy. So I think the front office has to be the one to really look at Randle and say, what can we do with him, or do we have to move on without him?
Right. And the last question on his emotionality, and anybody who wants to go back and answer that question, you can, is do you think his emotionality, his antics, whatever you want to call it, do you agree with the narrative that it negatively impacts the younger players?
Can I go first, please?
Yeah.
So as far as the last question is concerned, I think the front office already knew that Randle wasn't going to be a number one guy for a contending team. I think he's paid, the way he's paid to basically tells you that. And I think that, just like we've always been saying, they are going to stay put and wait until someone becomes available to swing that bat. Right. But in the meantime, we're just going to pay this guy, hit our salary cap floor. The Knicks, they don't spend a lot of money. Their payroll is not with a bunch of large contracts, and they're going to continue to develop the players. Right. The second question that you asked him, as far as his antics are concerned, I don't think so. I look at, of course, as fans, we don't want to see that, particularly after a game Randle doesn't play well. But I still think that his teammates are picking him up when he's out there on the bench. From what we see on camera, it's, him just sitting there with his head down and things of that nature. But I think his teammates really do support him, particularly the younger guys. And I think he's there for the younger guys as well. So I don't think the antics are as that big of a deal to the young players or development as people are making it seem. I just don't see that in person and on, just in general.
Tony, then we'll get to Sim.
The first question, I think it is up to the front office, but I also believe that had Rose not got hurt, if Rose was on the floor, I think that changes things. I think that's a guy that Randle respects on the floor and off the floor. I think he takes control of a lot of the late game decision makings and is accustomed to it. So it kind of puts Randle at a better position to do less of the decision making and really just rely on that bread and butter and finishing, whether it be with a jump shot or at the rim. So I think the front office needs to address the situation because, one, we're not putting Rose in the starting lineup, and we need somebody at that position to start. But down the stretch, I think they thought we had that guy. And obviously he's been out. The second question, the antics. I'm on both sides with this one. I think I agree with Josh. I think the teammates support him. The teammates respect him. I'm gonna say this. Thank God we do have other good vets like Taj that they can learn from. like Rose that they can learn from. And I think both those guys, Taj and Rose, have the cachet to speak to Randle and kind of like let him know, like, you know, this is not a good look. It's okay here, and maybe work on this optically. So I think he can fix it. You know what I mean? But there is a small part of me that is a little concerned, but we don't have enough time for me to get into it in detail.
All right. Cutting room floor on the crossover.
There you go. There you go. There you go.
Sam?
Yeah. As far as the first question, yeah, I do think it's on the front office to put some players with Randle, you know, that can take some of the responsibility off of his plate. I agree with Josh. I think that they already kind of knew what Randle was, but I believe that they were looking at this year to say, we think we know what he is, but can he step it up another level now? You know what I mean? So I think, you know, when they brought in a guy like Kemba, I think they were looking at saying, you know, we're going to see if he can be our decision maker and step it up to another level. You know what I mean?
Good point.
And now they've learned that maybe we need somebody else out there. I do think, you know, Ron was saying he doesn't think Tibbs can be objective with Randle. I actually do think he can. I just feel like Tibbs believes right now that Randle is the best playmaker that he has. So that's why he's been going with Randle for this season. But if you look at the last game, he went with RJ down the stretch. RJ had the ball in his hands while Randle was off the ball. So maybe he's starting to say, maybe RJ can do some of this, you know. But I think right now he's looking at saying, this is the best that I got, so I'm rocking with the guy. As far as Randle's antics and how they impact the younger players, you know, it can be both ways. I've seen it a lot where a player who is just negative, you know, and the thing is, we don't know how he is in the locker room. I think that's the important part. On the court is one thing. In the locker room is something totally different. So if in the locker room they have a really, really good relationship, he's working hard in practice, you know, when they practice and those type of things, I think it changes. Because now, you know, when you have a blow up or this or that, your teammates are there to support you. Where if you are alienating them in the locker room and you're having these antics, it's like, get that guy away from me. You know what I'm saying? So I think the thing is, we don't know what's going on in the locker room. You know what I'm saying? So that's how I think it can impact the kids. You know what I mean? If in the locker room, there's blow-ups in the locker room and it's happening in the locker room and he's getting at people in the locker room and things like that, then the kid's going to be like, man, you know, I'm unhappy. If it's not like that and he's a good guy in the locker room, but it's happening on the court, then I think they support him. And I also feel like, how do the coaches use these situations as learning lessons for everybody? You know what I'm saying? You know, are they able to transition what happens with Randle, and not as a way to embarrass him and say, let me show you what not to do, but as a way to say, we all have to learn how to handle pressure situations. We all have to learn how to handle the media. You know what I'm saying? And right now, he's falling on the sword for us, but how can we support him and how can we learn from it? You know what I mean? So how are they spending that in the locker room?
Yeah, I mean, for the sake of time, we have to move on to the other segments, but I will just piggyback off of you, Sam, and say that's the same for the coach. All we see is Tibbs cursing at them, getting on certain players. He has to be different in the locker room for them to respect him the way they do, right? Yep. If he's doing the same thing in the locker room, you know, it's a whole different story. But if they're respecting him, it's probably because he's somewhat different. With them in the locker room. Real quick, Tony, before we move on. Yeah.
I just wanted to say, like, we always noticed how, you know, Derrick Rose is sitting next to Obi when he gets when he's pulled out of a situation or whatever, and we give him kudos and credit for that. But guess what? Chances are we're never going to see that with Randle, because he's on the floor when Obi's getting pulled. So they don't even have that bench interaction for Obi to be like, you know what, it's all right. So when we do see it, it's in the passing. You know what I mean? When Obi's coming off, he's coming on. He might give him a little tap on the shoulder, things of that nature. But we're not going to see it like that. That stuff is behind the scenes. That's in the locker room. If it's happening, it's not going to be on the bench.
Or
and maybe we won't hear about it until he's fired or let go or there's a coaching change, and then it'll all spill out. Shout out to Eddie F for the super chat. This came up in the chat. Did Tibbs lose Randle or enable Randle? I wish we had time to discuss that. The only thing I'll say about really holding a player accountable, especially your best player, you better make sure the front office is behind you and with you on that when you're trying to hold him accountable, especially if you're going to do it publicly, because that can create a rift in the organization.
Karl Anthony Towns, he lived through it. Tibbs lived through it.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a good point. So let's move to. Where are we? Play of the week, R.J. Barrett, 24.8 points a game, 8.3 rebounds a game, 2.8 assists a game. Shot only 39.2% from the field, only 24.1% from the three-point line, and 75% from the free throw line. I don't usually do this with play of the week, but just quickly go around. Do you agree, or can somebody else be play of the week even if they're not the highest scorer on the team? Starting.
You want us to name a player, or you just asking a blanket?
Either way, you could do it. You could do it. Either way, do you agree or disagree? Is there another player you thought was play of the week? And just in general, can somebody be play of the week who's not the leading scorer? All right,
I'll lead. I'll lead. All right. I think this is great for you to give him player of the week, because that's 25 points basically on low shooting percentages, which is an actual dip from his recent play in weeks past. But I wouldn't have been mad if you gave it to IQ, because of where he's gone with bringing that percentage up, and really winning us a game without Randle and with RJ having a pretty poor game in a sense of his recent play.
All right. And you can always comment if you have any comments on RJ's play this week.
Yeah.
Tony?
Yeah.
I agree. I mean, Josh.
I agree with Tony. I think you could make an argument for IQ, but I'm going to go with RJ Barrett here. I know we were talking earlier in the season about if RJ Barrett can start to become a volume scorer. He's definitely been taking more shots, and that's why you've seen his efficiency dip. I don't think he's at that level of shot making yet, where we can say that night in and night out this is going to be his thing. But the fact that he's taking these shots and he realized that he needed to seize this opportunity and seize this moment, I think says a lot about him. He's taking that next step, and I think he is the engine. He's been our engine since Randle's been out, and so I think it's appropriate to give him player of the week. But you could also make the argument for IQ developing that point guard skills and things of that nature.
Sam and then Ron.
Yeah, I'm cool with RJ being the player of the week, and you could go with IQ. He hit a lot of big shots for us, brought the Knicks back in that Miami game, but also in that Miami game, R.J. Barrett had to make a couple of big plays just passing out of the trap, even though he wasn't shooting well. And those plays were big just as well. And then obviously in previous games, R.J. Barrett had, some really good games. So, yeah, I think R.J. Barrett right now is in a stretch where he's learning how to be, and the Knicks are trying to see if he can be, a number one guy, a guy that you can really ride to the end. And I'm interested to see tonight if they go to him in the clutch, and let him be the creator in the clutch over Julius Randle. But, yeah, R.J. Barrett, player of the week. I'm with it.
All right. Ron?
Yeah, I'm definitely fine with that. And to answer your question, I think you can have a player of the week who wasn't necessarily the leading scorer. Someone can have really great overall games in several different games, and those were keys to victory, even if they weren't the highest output in scoring. So I think it can happen, but I do think that RJ is the right pick for this. And really quickly, it's just a small sample size, so you can't really say anything. But, RJ was averaging in his career 17 points, 5.5 rebounds, 2.8 assists with Julius Randle, and without Julius Randle, 21 points per game, 6.6 assists, and 3.1 assists per game. I'm only bringing this up because it just shows that when Randle's not there, RJ has been able to step up and try to give the Knicks what they need in Randle's absence. Not that he's better without him, just that he steps up.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Yep.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, we gotta move on. I wish we had enough time to talk about that Miami game. I missed the post game. I'm pretty sure you guys talked about it. I didn't get a chance to watch it, but Randle not being there and the team's keying on him, and just what that development is going to be like for him, even with Randle on the team. I think they'll probably be game planning for both of them next season if Randle is still here, and if Randle is not here, definitely going to be game planning for him. And I wanted to get your thoughts on just him growing into that role, but we can do that next week because the Knicks play at 7:30 and it is already 7:24. All right. So we got 4 games this week. Chicago and Charlotte at home, at Cleveland. No, Cleveland also at home. 3 at home, and then Orlando. Any quick thoughts and predictions? 3 of these teams are in the playoffs. The next 3 teams are already in the playoffs. And then Orlando, we lost to them twice. So just your thoughts and predictions on this upcoming week of games.
Well, I just wanted to say one thing, Steph. You got a little bit more time because apparently it's a 7:40 start. Just wanted to let you know that.
Yeah, they do start at 7:40. Yeah.
I'll jump in here. What I like about this week, Chicago, Charlotte, Cleveland, all teams that are in the playoffs, and if the Knicks can come away and win 2 of these games against teams that are currently fighting for playoff position, right? Charlotte is fighting to remain in the play-in. Cleveland and Chicago, they're fighting to. Cleveland's trying to get in the top 6. Actually, I think they're 7 right now, and Chicago's trying to stay in the top 6. Right. So if the Knicks can win some of these games, if not all 3, if they can win some of these games, I think it does send that message, like I was saying earlier, that they believe that they belong with these guys, and they want to prove to people that we're still that team that belongs in this mix. It didn't go that way this season, but we're still that team. So I'd like to see them knock off these guys.
Right. And let me just say to somebody in the chat, Greg, Charlotte and Atlanta are safe. Give it up, Sim. They very well may be safe, but still, if you win against these guys, it does say in your psyche, yeah, we can play with these guys. We may be just as good as these guys. We had a couple of bumps along the way. There's certain things we have to learn along the way. Things didn't go our way during the season. But in terms of talent-wise, I think we can hang with these guys. So that's probably what the players and coaches staff may be thinking. And I'm interested to see that as well. These are playoff teams that are playing for something. Can the Knicks beat them? That tells me a little something about them, exactly. As well as we head into the off season.
Right.
I think these next 3 games are against teams who were once higher in the Eastern Conference standards, but they have slid, and now they're actually fighting for something instead of being locked into whatever seeding that they're in. Right, particularly Chicago. Chicago was the top team in the Eastern Conference just a few months ago, and once they lost Lonzo Ball, that was it. Right, so they're still trying to find their footing and get themselves prepared for the playoffs. Charlotte is another team. I know we struggled to match that matchup against them, but they have been sliding and they're fighting for playoff position. And even Cleveland. Cleveland was one of those teams like young teams like Memphis that everyone was talking about. They're going to be really good in a few years. They've slid down to the seventh spot. So I think at this point in the season, with the Knicks kind of riding the high and starting to get confident within themselves, I think these are all 3 winnable games. Particularly if those other teams take the Knicks for granted and the Knicks go in at home and pull these games out. So, and Orlando, of course, they're in a lottery team, super lottery team. So I want to say, whatever, but I think these next 3 games are winnable for sure. At home, absolutely.
All right, let me get the super chat because you know how my memory is. I'm gonna forget it. Shout out to Johnny P. I appreciate the super chat. Management needs to get rid of Julius Randle. This player is not good for the team. I'll be at Grand Central to help him roll on out of here. Listen, there's a lot of the fan base that feels the same way. Just because of his antics emotionally, I feel like, yeah, it may be best to move on for him. But without that, I'm ready to roll with his inefficiencies. I think we can work with it and put him in the different spots on the floor to be successful. Take the playmaking and decision making, a lot of that out of his hand. But it's the emotional stuff that's giving me pause right now.
Yep.
Tony, and then we'll come to Ron about predictions.
I think they're all winnable. I'm gonna just say I think we go 4-0. You know, I was on this game by game thing, but I think we go 4-0, and not that it changes our status, but one thing that used to bother me in the 90s was a lot of teams always played spoiler for us, you know, where it hurt us position wise. We're in a position to play spoiler and hurt some of these guys. However, even though it don't benefit us, you know, let's play spoiler. Let that be a goal.
Okay. Ron?
So let's see. I get to do this twice. Once for your show, and then I got to do it in a couple hours.
Okay.
I'm gonna say, I think that this is interesting because these are actually the way they're playing right now, the confidence level that they're showing in themselves. They could really win all of these games. Whether or not that's actually going to take place, I don't know. Realistically, I see this as a 2-2 out of these four. Like with the game, most interesting game to me is this game tonight against Chicago, because Chicago is not playing the greatest lately, and the Knicks are, you know, with some newfound confidence, they might be able to steal this one, and that would change that 2-2 to 3-1, because I think they can beat Charlotte, even though Charlotte's playing well. But I think the Knicks are gonna try to stick it to Charlotte, because Charlotte has been a thorn all year. And then Cleveland, it's always a battle, but I think the Knicks can beat Cleveland if they play their A game. You know, the loss of Jarrett Allen I think that really impacts Cleveland.
Big time.
And then,
big time for them.
And then, I forgot. The kryptonite is there. Orlando. That's a loss.
Right.
Out the gate.
You mean Nick tonight?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. All right.
We'll see. Yeah, but I think they could take this. It'd be a 2-2 week, maybe a 3-1 week, depending on how tonight goes. Tonight could be really big for their confidence. I mean, you know, this could turn into a 4-0 week for the Knicks if they beat Chicago tonight.
Right.
Yeah, definitely.
Right.
Sam, did you go yet?
Yeah, I did. Yep.
Okay. I'm saying the Knicks are going 4-0.
Okay.
I just like the way they've been. I like the way they've been playing of late. The defensive energy as well. You know, Randle talked a little bit about him not being totally 100% just in terms of conditioning and feeling winded. And maybe that may have had something to do with last game, where I did feel his energy wasn't quite there. And I know we talk about ball movement. We talked about this earlier in the show, but sometimes you need somebody to get you a basket. And it's just and in those times, you're going to have to go ISO. The issue I have with Randle is that he goes ISO when he's not having a good game.
Yeah.
He's
Right.
inefficient. He didn't miss five, and now he wants to be the one taking these fall away jumpers. It's not your time. If you're not having a good game, that ball needs to go to RJ. And RJ is really inefficient at times, maybe even IQ, the way he's playing when we need a bucket. Any last words before we get out of here?
Yeah, I just want to say, I think the reason why I'm so a lot of us are so confident about these next 4 games is because we've learned how to close. It seems like, right? Those 3 games that we won, those 3 games in a row, we closed those games out. And I think the biggest problem this season, as far as our win-loss record, is the games that we had an opportunity to win, we couldn't close them. And just to plug my show tomorrow, I'll be on with CT from the Streets of Buzzing podcast at around 6 p.m. right here on NBK. Tune in.
Okay,
Right.
we'll do.
That's what's up. All right.
Great show. Thank you for having us. Great panel. The NBK starting 5. Your Black is time. Shout out to the chat.
Yeah, definitely. Great show, man. One thing I did wanted to touch on really quick, and I'm only going to be 10 seconds here. I think that, Steph, you touched on it. I think Tibbs really does have a good relationship with the guys in the locker room. It's the whole, you give someone, a good attention 3 times more than you give them negative attention. You know what I'm saying? And it builds that relationship so that when you do have to give them negative attention, it doesn't hurt him as much. So I think he builds good relationships with those guys, or else he wouldn't be able to scream at them and holler at them and get in their face without them really feeling some kind of way. So I think he has, man. And I'm just looking forward to the Knicks continuing to play well down the stretch, win as many games as possible, and try to, continue to build off going into next season.
I agree with that, Sim, and I think you are right. I mean, that's the reason why you see pictures of him floating around going to dinner with Fat Joe and RJ and Randall.
Right.
Like, I've never seen Tibbs out like this ever.
I haven't even seen those photos.
Yeah, he's out there. He's at. I know because Fat Joe's lives in so he must be at Fat Joe's place or one of Fat Joe's restaurants that he likes to go to. They all went out to dinner. So he's definitely rocking out with the Knicks.
Yeah.
So great show. Thank you for having me, Steph. As always a pleasure to be with y'all gentlemen. You know how I feel. And we going on at 9 for still Knicks fans, guys. I know you're gonna be watching the Knicks game, but hey, you can watch the replay. It'll be there. So thank y'all.
We'll be there.
Yeah, definitely. I appreciate all of you I wasn't even sure on such short notice. A 6:30 show, I was going to have a panel, and bam, here we go. It's 5 of us. But I appreciate y'all for always being willing to come on the Queen's Court. The crossover is Wednesday. I think the Knicks play Wednesday. The Knicks play Wednesday.
Yeah.
So what time we go? What time we going on?
We're going to go on an hour before me and Tony Crow on the crossover. We'll go on an hour before the Knicks play on Wednesday. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel, Dope Soul Sports Talk, something I'm doing in addition to what I'm doing here on NBK. There's more to come. I appreciate all the support already. I'm almost to 100 subscribers in about a week or whatever. So I appreciate all of you. Appreciate your support. I dropped my video late on my take on the Detroit game. If you didn't look at it yet, give it a watch. And with that, we are out.